Hello dear listener, please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. I sat on a bench behind a wooden table under the scorching sun, diligently whittling a feeble semblance of a toy from a small piece of wood with a tiny knife. It wasn't clear if it was a horse or a donkey, but it was meant for my little nephew who sat across from me, patiently waiting for me to finish crafting his toy. The little 5-year-old observed my every move closely, and with shavings falling onto the table and the ground occasionally rustled from a light breeze, I continued to carve, periodically wiping the sweat from my brow. A few minutes later, my sister approached us, carrying a refreshing lemonade, which was much needed in the sweltering heat. I gratefully accepted the drink from her and downed it almost in one go. "Would you like another one?" Linda asked. "Yes, please. Another glass would be perfect." "It's incredibly refreshing," I replied. "All right, hand me the glass." "I'll get some more." "Kevin, would you like to go inside?" she asked her young son. "No," he replied in a small voice. "Well then, put on your cap," she said, pulling a child-sized Panama hat from under her arm and placing it on the boy's head. He frowned slightly because he didn't like wearing any kind of headgear, but he obeyed his mother. Once he realized that the sun wasn't scorching his head anymore, he stopped protesting altogether. I waited for my sister to return with more lemonade, then resumed my work. After about 10 minutes, I finished crafting the small wooden toy, which turned out to be quite cute. Kevin took it to his play spot in the shade and continued playing with his other toys, but he held on to the new one. I headed back inside the house. It was time for me to prepare for my journey. I was returning from a friend who had been in an accident. I had stayed with him for 2 days, and on the way back, I decided to stop by my sister's place to rest and gather strength before the upcoming journey. I was actually glad for the opportunity to visit her again. We hadn't seen each other for over a year, because she had moved to another city with her second husband after getting married. I had been too busy with work, and we never found the time to visit each other. Only the tragic incident with my friend had brought me back to see my sister and my little nephew. Luckily, Derek's condition was not as critical as I had feared. I would even say that his pride was more injured than anything else. Nevertheless, I was grateful to have a break from my hectic life and spend some time with him. But now it was time to head home, where my dull job and occasionally quarrelsome wife awaited me. "Maybe you'll stay a little longer? Take a break. Dad will be away for a few more days, so you won't have to deal with his drunken grumbling," Linda suggested. "No, Linda, I need to go. I only took a few days off," I replied to my sister. "What else could I do? Who else would take me with a little child? Besides, he's not as bad as you think. He works hard, provides for us, and takes care of us." "Really? Tell me again how you got that bruise on your eye." Linda lowered her gaze and touched a small bruise at the corner of her right eye. "Yes, it was from a cabinet," she admitted hesitantly. "But I assure you it's fine. You don't need to worry." "How can I not worry? You're my sister. If I had known earlier, I would never have let you marry him. And I'm not giving up on my offer to have you move in with us. We have plenty of room, enough for everyone. Our kids would be great friends." I said, "No, Stephen. Please," she interrupted me. "It really was just an accident." She looked at me so pleadingly that I had to believe her, although deep down, I still had doubts about her husband's integrity. At that moment, Kevin entered the room and asked his mother for some water, saying that he was very hot. Linda persuaded him to stay inside until the sun went down a bit, and when he finally headed to his room, I stopped him for a moment. "Hey, Kevin, come say goodbye to Uncle. I'll be leaving soon." The little boy approached me and hugged me in his childlike way. "Take care of Mom, okay?" I told him. He nodded and went back to his new toy. I said my goodbyes to my sister, grabbed the basket of water and cookies she had baked for me, and headed to my car. The journey back home was not short, and I wanted to make it there before nightfall. However, the evening I returned home turned out to be less than ideal than I had imagined. It was already dark when I crossed the threshold of the house, and I was eager to share the recent events with my wife. I started calling her name, looking around, but she didn't respond for a while. I entered the living room and noticed that she had dozed off on the couch while a movie played on the television. I approached her and realized that she had fallen asleep. Not wanting to disturb her, I fetched a blanket from the nearby table and gently covered her. As I was about to head to the kitchen, she opened her eyes. "Oh, you're back already?" "It hasn't even been a year," she said with a half smile. "Hey there. I thought you fell asleep," I replied. "Yeah, I dozed off for a bit. The movie was boring and I've had a long day. Where's Michael? Is he asleep? I don't know. He should be in his room." When I came down, he was watching cartoons on his computer. "I'll go check." "Okay, I'll do it. If you're so tired, I still need to get up." "I can't sleep here. Or is that what you want?" She got up from the couch, letting the blanket slip to the floor, and ran her fingers through her hair as she left the room. I picked up the basket from the table and headed for the kitchen. On the way, I hadn't touched the cookies. For some reason, I didn't feel like eating. Maybe because of the heat, or perhaps because my sister had fed me almost to bursting before my departure. Now I hoped my son would enjoy the treats. He loved cookies, especially when they were topped with jam. In a few minutes, Josefina descended the stairs, looking genuinely tired, with slight puffiness under her eyes. "How are you feeling?" I expressed concern for her health. "You don't look too good." "I'm fine, just tired, I told you. Why are you so worried?" She replied. "Oh, come on. If I were worried, I wouldn't have left for a few days. You know how capricious Michael can be. Today he really tested my patience. Only cartoons managed to calm him down," she said as she poured herself some juice from the fridge and sat down with a glass. "Did you check on him? Is he asleep?" "Yes, I did. He's asleep now. I moved him to his bed. Otherwise, he'll complain tomorrow that he didn't get enough sleep. You should have called me. He's not exactly easy to handle." "Oh, stop it. Do you think I'm completely helpless? I can take care of him." "I don't get it then. Why do you complain? Did you have a bad day? Or are you planning another argument with me?" I finished arranging the snacks my sister had brought in a deep plate while my wife continued to confront me. Towards the end, she lost her temper, left her glass on the table, and walked out of the kitchen. When I was done, I found her in the bedroom. She was coming out of the bathroom, getting ready for bed. I didn't want to argue with her late at night, especially since I was quite tired. The journey had been long and the hot air had drained me. Josefina seemed genuinely exhausted as well, as she didn't continue the conversation that was taking an unpleasant turn. The next day I had to return to work. I had managed to squeeze in my trip during the weekend, but now I had to go back to the monotonous job that didn't pay too well. Secretly, I had been looking for a new job that would provide a bit more satisfaction than my current one for several weeks. When I descended the stairs, my family was already in the kitchen. My wife was diligently preparing breakfast, while my son sat at the table, eagerly awaiting his portion of scrambled eggs. When he saw me, he rushed over, showing how much he had missed me. I picked him up in my arms and entered the kitchen. "How did you sleep?" my wife asked. "Fine. Why? You were tossing and turning almost all night." "I woke up a few times." "Really? I'm sorry. I guess the road tired me out. But you look a bit better today. It's just the magic of morning makeup. That's all. Are you having breakfast?" "Yes, please. I have a full day at work ahead. I talked to a colleague last night and it seems like we're swamped." "I don't understand how you can spend a whole day there. You just sit at your desks, occasionally leaving them. Oh, you just don't understand the intricacies. Yes, it can get a bit dull, but it's not that bad. You're right. I don't understand. You've never really explained what you do there," she grumbled. "Oh, come on. You know I can't talk about it. It's just a regular office job." "How's Linda? I forgot to ask yesterday. And Kevin, he must be getting big now. It's been so long since they visited us." "They're fine. Kevin is growing up. I offered them to come and stay with us for a while, but Linda refused." "And what does Dag say about it?" "He wasn't there. He's on a trip somewhere. Besides, I was only with her for half a day. I spent the night on the road and left the next day. It's a shame you didn't agree to come with me. We could have had a chat." "Well, you know how much I dislike these trips. Maybe next time. Here's your scrambled eggs, Michael. It's ready for you. Nicely browned on both sides. Eat it all." She served us breakfast and soon she joined us at the table. I was glad that her nervousness had passed, and I shared with her how I had spent my time during my visit with my friend and what had happened with my sister. The only thing I omitted was my suspicion that Linda might be physically abusive. Although she strongly denied it, the bruise near her eye indicated otherwise. I planned to visit my sister again in a few days on the next weekend to investigate further. Deep down, I hoped she was telling the truth and had indeed accidentally injured herself. While I sat outside with young Kevin, I tried to ask him some leading questions to gauge whether Dag mistreated them. But the child didn't reveal anything suspicious. The following days passed in my life as usual. I went to work, while my wife stayed at home crafting artificial flower arrangements which she later sold online or delivered to the local store. Our son was getting ready to start first grade this year, but it was still summer, and he enjoyed his childhood by playing with the neighborhood boys or spending time on the computer, mainly watching cartoons or playing online games. Sometimes, when I entered his room and observed his gaming, I realized that kids nowadays understood the latest gadgets and technology much faster and easier than an ordinary adult like me. For instance, I only knew how to work with the computer within the scope of office tasks and basic data input programs that were used at my workplace. Honestly, I didn't have the time or desire to delve deeper into the world of computers. I preferred spending my free time in real life, such as going for walks with my family in the park or going out with friends. However, lately, I found myself spending more evenings at home when my wife would start her tantrums. I lost all motivation to go anywhere. Occasionally, I would meet up with a friend at a bar where we would have some beer and engage in manly conversations. When I returned home, Josephine would try to pick a fight with me, suspecting that I had been out with other women. "You're driving me crazy. Why are you constantly like this with me? When have I given you any reason to doubt me? You know I have to work, and you don't want to go out with me. Can I even leave the house now?" I would argue with her. Our unpleasant argument was interrupted by a phone call. I was somewhat relieved and rushed to answer it. It was my sister. Her voice sounded sad, and it was clear that something was troubling her. "Yes, sister. What's wrong?" I asked. I don't even know where to start. I'm so upset. Steven, what did he do? Did he hurt you? I asked, growing concerned. "What's going on?" My wife approached, curious about my conversation with my sister. I turned to her, placing my index finger against my lips to signal that she should keep quiet, and then moved to the side with the phone, noticing her annoyed expression. "Linda, tell me what happened. If that scoundrel did something to you, I'll be there right away." "Oh no, he didn't touch me, I assure you. It's just that lately he's been acting like a complete stranger. He's been going on more trips, and when he returned the last time, he mostly ignored me and doesn't play with Kevin anymore." I don't know what to think. "What does he say to you? How does he explain it?" I inquired. "He doesn't, really. He just says he's tired, that work is tough, and that I should leave him alone. But I feel like it's not about work at all. Yesterday I went to his car, as usual, to collect his dirty laundry. And when I was gathering his things, I found women's lingerie under the seat. Oh, Steven, I think he's cheating on me. I don't even know what to say. Have you asked him about it?" Of course I did. I brought them to him and asked what it was. But all he did was yell at me and tell me to mind my own business. "Do you want me to talk to him? And honestly, you shouldn't continue living with him. I've said before that he seems shady. I'll have a direct conversation with him and find out who he's cheating on you with and how long it's been going on. You should leave him." But Linda continued to deny the possibility, saying that maybe she had misunderstood the situation. I felt like she was simply intimidated. However, she also mentioned that when she checked his phone one night, she noticed he had been calling my wife frequently. She knew her number and became curious about why they were in such frequent contact, so she decided to call me and share everything, hoping I could provide some explanation. However, I didn't know what to tell her. At the same time, I felt a piercing gaze from my wife on my back. When I turned around, she was standing right beside me, staring at me with a cold gaze, and I even flinched. My wife's abrupt appearance behind me slightly distracted me. For a moment, I even forgot what I was talking about with my sister, but I quickly regained my composure and tried to divert her attention away from my conversation. "What's going on?" she whispered. Later I replied, covering the receiver with my hand, and gestured for her to leave me alone. Then I resumed my conversation with my sister. "What's with her?" "I don't understand," Linda said seriously. "Leave him and come to us. At least for a while. Or I'll come over and sort everything out." "No, Stephen. It's not necessary. Let things stay as they are," I responded. "I'm sorry I bothered you. I shouldn't have called." The phone emitted a series of short beeps, indicating the call had ended. Now, I couldn't simply leave it at that without finding out what was really going on. Lowering my hand while still holding the phone, I turned to look at my wife again. She was sitting at the table pretending as if nothing had happened. She continued to chop salad vigorously on a cutting board, banging on it intensely with a big knife. I placed the phone on a countertop and approached her, sitting down across from her. She glanced at me, as if uninterested in the topic of conversation I had just had with my sister, even though a minute ago she had been eager to dive into the conversation and find out everything. "Is something wrong?" Josefina asked when she noticed my intense gaze on her. "Can you tell me something?" I asked. "I was just talking to my sister. I gathered that it wasn't the Pope." "What did she want?" "Trouble with her husband," Linda replied. "Do you talk to them often?" "You have plenty of time. You're home most of the time." "No, not often." "Why?" "Just curious. I thought maybe she talked to you, like a woman to woman, sharing her problems. Maybe she's too embarrassed to tell me. You know, women's stuff." I decided not to tell my wife that I knew about her frequent conversations with Doug. I hoped she would tell me herself. After all, if she had nothing to hide from me, she could be honest with me. But she didn't give me the answer I was expecting. It was as if she had no idea why I was asking her. No, she didn't tell me anything. I don't communicate with her that much. You know, I'm at home but I'm still working. My jewelry work requires time and patience. Did something happen to her? I told you. It's just family problems. I left the kitchen, leaving my wife to continue with preparing lunch, and began contemplating how I should handle the situation. While my sister had asked me not to meddle in her relationship with her husband, I couldn't just let it go now, especially since I had learned that perhaps he was more involved with my wife than just making phone calls. I was determined to find out everything, no matter what. Settling more comfortably on the couch, I picked up a magazine for cover and started thinking about how to conduct my investigation. I sat by the table for about half an hour, randomly flipping through pages of the magazine, not finding anything of interest. Then my wife entered the room. She sat down next to me and pushed the magazine aside with her hand. "I was actually reading that," I said. "Oh yeah? What's it about?" Must be convenient to read upside down. Only now did I notice that I was holding the magazine upside down. I put it aside and turned to her. "Did you want something?" I asked. "Yeah, lunch is ready. Are you going to eat?" "I already summoned Michael and he'll be here soon." "I'll be there in a moment." "So what were you thinking about?" "After the call with your sister, you seem like you're not here." "Is it really that complicated? Why don't you share it with me? Maybe I can help." For a moment I wanted to blurt out everything I was thinking. But I held back, realizing that it wouldn't accomplish anything except starting another argument. So I simply asked her what was for lunch, changing the topic. For a few moments she stepped back as she poured food into plates. But then her curiosity interrupted the silence again. "Is she coming over?" she asked. "Though?" I inquired, hoping she would stop. "Your sister. I heard you inviting her. Is she coming for a long stay? What's she here for? She has her own home and family. Or did something serious happen?" "Why are you asking so many questions, Josefina? It's like you're hiding something from me." "Why would I be hiding anything? Where did you get that idea?" "No, not at all. Just curious," she replied, stumbling slightly. "If she comes, it means more hassle, and the kids will be noisier. I remember when they visited us, a year ago. They stayed only for 2 days, but they made such a mess that I had to clean up for another 2 days." "Why are you making such a fuss?" "Yes, I invited her to stay with us. What's the big deal? Can you just let me eat in peace?" I began to get agitated. Is Aunt Linda coming over? Our son asked as he entered the kitchen. Oh, finally, you tore yourself away from your cartoons, my wife remarked. Sit down, come on. The food is getting cold. Dad, is she coming? Our son asked me. Maybe, buddy. Do you miss her? Yeah. What about little Kevin? Do you remember him? Yeah. Well, they might come. If you eat well and behave yourself, I said, tousling his hair, and he eagerly picked up his spoon, waiting for his portion. Lunch proceeded relatively calmly, and it seemed that Josefina didn't want to discuss the matter further in front of our son, knowing he would insist on Aunt Linda and Kevin coming over. After lunch, I called a friend and invited him for a beer, hoping that Josefina would stop dwelling on our recent conversation. When I met up with my friend in the park, I decided to confide in him about the problems I was facing. We often shared both joys and troubles with each other. Now it seemed like it was my turn to complain about life, and he, as a close friend, was a willing listener. What do you plan to do? Tim asked. I don't know yet. I'm not sure where to start. Right now, I just wish I could be there and have a serious talk with that bastard. I feel like Linda isn't telling me everything. Why is something stopping you? Take some time off and go. Family is always more important than work. I can try to help with getting you some time off. Thanks, my friend. I considered that option, but I also need to sort things out with my wife. What do you think? Why does she talk to my son-in-law so often? I don't know. Only you can find out. Do you want to keep an eye on her? Maybe. But how? I have very few opportunities. Hiring a private detective is out of my budget right now. Well, in my opinion, it's all pretty straightforward. Your wife talks to him on the phone a lot. Your son-in-law is cheating on his wife. Does your wife go out when he's supposedly away on business trips? I can't say for sure. Maybe she does. I never even thought about it. I'm telling you, I wouldn't think twice about her. And I wouldn't think twice about him either. Don't worry. It'll all work out somehow. I'm just sure of it. Have you tried talking to your wife? Asked her about the phone calls? Why is she talking to him so much? Well, I've asked her about something, but she won't talk. Have you checked her phone? Maybe you should look at the call list and messages. Wow, you're like an investigator. Why don't you take the case yourself? I slightly resented that. Yeah, her phone is always password protected. How am I supposed to check it? See, I hate to break it to you, but I'd think about it if I were you. I thought about it with my head down and realized that Tim was right in his thinking. But when I thought about it, in all the years we've been together, my wife had decided to have an affair on the side. I just refused to believe it. Why would she do such a thing? I never hurt her in any way. I did not even force her to go to work. Doing everything to be able to provide for the family. She decided to do her own handicrafts, so she wouldn't go crazy with idleness. That evening, I decided to have a conversation with my wife. I hoped it wouldn't escalate into a major fight. I just wanted her to look me in the eyes and swear that there was no one else but me, and that everything else was just a misunderstanding. After chatting with my friend some more, I said goodbye, but I didn't go home yet. I stayed for a walk along the embankment, thinking and reflecting. It was only a couple of hours later, when it started to get dark, that I returned home, and without any explanation, I asked my wife to give me her phone number. Why do you need my phone? She asked, looking surprised. Can you just give it to me, or are you hiding something? No, I have no secrets from you. Why are you so worked up? Did you go drinking again? What did your friend say this time? She launched an attack. Nothing, just give me the damn phone, I shouted. Josephine, though reluctant, reached into her purse and pulled out a phone. What's the password? I asked. But she continued to sit there with her eyes bulging at me. Password, I shouted again. Then she uttered 6 digits that unlocked her phone. I sank into the chair in the far corner and began to dig through the call history and read all the messages. But when I opened it, all I saw were empty logs. There was no history. The entire list was missing. Did you clear it? I angrily asked Stephen. What are you talking about? I hadn't even noticed how anger stemming from suspicion of infidelity began to envelop me. I got up from the chair, grabbed her by the hair, and almost thrust her face into her phone. Calls, call history. Did you deliberately clear it? Did you think I wouldn't find out? I demanded. Josephine started screaming and tried to free herself from me. "Why are you saying this? What are you talking about?" she cried. "Yes, I regularly clear it. Is that a crime?" I asked, my anger rising. "What's gotten into you? Let go, damn it, it hurts." At that moment, it was as if I was looking at myself from the outside, seeing a mad tyrant tormenting his wife. I released my grip, realizing that I was crossing a line. But how else could I find out the truth? Josephine was unlikely to confess, especially after I raised my hand to her. I had never done that before, and understood that my actions could further damage our already strained relationship. Releasing my wife, I went outside to get some fresh air and regain my composure. Yes, I wished I could go back in time and not behave like a jealous fool. But I couldn't change the past. I now had only two options. Either believe my wife and try to mend our relationship, or continue to investigate this matter. I didn't know where that would lead, and I even feared what I might discover. When I returned to the house, my wife didn't speak to me anymore. She silently put our son to bed and prepared for sleep herself. I wanted to apologize to her, but something held me back. Perhaps my male pride or a premonition that she wasn't as innocent as she seemed. Nevertheless, I also went to bed. However, my wife threw me one sentence for the evening. She told me to sleep in another room. Deciding not to argue with her any further that night, I took a pillow and headed to the living room, hoping to fall asleep to the sound of the television. But I tossed and turned for a long time, and dirty thoughts wouldn't leave my mind. Another day off lay ahead, and I decided I had to go see my sister in person and find out everything on the spot. I didn't even consider waiting until morning. Hurriedly, I got ready and was soon driving to my sister's place. I had to be there by morning. I didn't know if my wife saw me leaving, and I didn't care. She usually slept soundly and shouldn't have heard anything. Finally, as the first rays of sunlight illuminated my windshield, I arrived at Linda's house. It was dark inside, and it seemed like everyone was asleep. I spotted Doug's truck from a distance, so at least he was home, which was a good sign since I hoped to talk to him. I approached the door and knocked forcefully because their doorbell was broken. About a minute later, my sleepy sister opened the door. Her hair was tousled and falling over her forehead, but I still noticed a new bruise on her face. "Stephen, is something wrong?" she asked. "Doesn't it look obvious?" I lifted her chin with my fingers to get a better look at the bruise. "The cupboard again? Looks like it's time to have a talk with that damn cupboard." I started to step inside. "Stephen, no. Please." But I was already almost inside the house, and her pleas couldn't stop me. I quickly found myself in their bedroom where Doug lay sprawled across the bed. "Hey, wake up, you bastard." The element of surprise was on my side, and I managed to grab his leg, pull him off the bed, and pounce on him with my fists. While I was pummeling him, he tried to grasp what was happening, and only when I allowed him to speak, pausing briefly, did he ask, "What the hell, man? Have you completely lost it? You scumbag, you're gonna answer for everything now." "For my sister and my wife. Speak, you bastard. Tell me everything. What the hell are you talking about?" He asked again. "Don't touch him. He's not to blame." I hit myself. A structure fell on me, my sister intervened. "What the hell kind of construction? You think I can't tell a household bruise from a beating? Don't you dare cover for him," I replied to my sister, continuing to hold the perpetrator of all these events by the throat. I wanted to strangle him right then and there so he would never harm my family again. When I turned to look at him, I noticed that his face had turned blue from my strong grip, and he had stopped breathing. For a moment, I even felt relieved that I had rid my family of a tyrant who had almost destroyed my family. I released my grip, looking at Dale's lifeless body, realizing that although I had eliminated the source of trouble, I had committed murder. A vision of my future flashed before my eyes, where I served time behind bars, and my family, my wife and son and my sister and nephew, never visited me, because they couldn't forgive me for my crimes. My sister for killing her husband and my wife for humiliating her and leaving her son without a father. Darkness seemed to close in on me, and I prepared myself deep down for the future consequences. Just then, he coughed and began to regain consciousness, clutching his throat and rubbing it. Linda rushed to him, glaring at me angrily. What the hell have you done? Doug, are you okay? She pressed herself against him, feeling his body to make sure he wasn't too badly hurt. I'm sorry, I said, sitting on the floor, leaning against the bed and covering my face with my hands. Doug continued to cough, and for a while there was complete silence between us. Linda was softly sobbing. I removed my hands from my face and looked at him when I heard him trying to stand up. I'm going to beat you up now, you sick bastard, he mumbled, seeing me, and was about to charge at me, but Linda tried to restrain him. Doug, please calm down. He didn't know. He was just worried about me. Put yourself in his shoes, Linda pleaded. Doug stepped back, listening to his wife, though I was already preparing for another confrontation. Linda's tears and her deep concern for her husband made me wonder if I had done the right thing. Maybe I should have just talked to them first. But at that moment, I couldn't contain myself any longer, and the sight of the bruise on my sister's face had added fuel to the fire of my anger. Stephen, you're wrong, she said to me. You should have listened first. Damn it, you could have killed him. Then explain it to me. So that I believe you, I grumbled in response. Stephen, Doug really had nothing to do with it, she began. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. And you, Doug, forgive him too. I should have called you, Stephen, and explained everything. It was just quite late and I thought you were already asleep. So what the hell happened? I asked. Someone first trashed everything and now you're all acting like this. I got up and sat on the bed. Linda and Doug sat down next to me, with Linda positioning herself between us, hoping to prevent a new fight. Listen, Stephen. It's true that I didn't touch Linda, Doug began. We even have video proof. I recorded when she was helping our son build a treehouse. You probably didn't notice it outside. But why am I explaining myself to him? Doug directed the last question to Linda. But Doug, we need to explain everything, Linda interjected. Stephen, do you promise not to fight anymore while I fetch the camera? Please. I shrugged, indicating that I was ready for reconciliation. Doug also nodded at her and my sister went to the other room. Doug, I didn't just come here for this, I said. I know, Stephen. Linda told me everything. I had a serious talk with her yesterday. To tell you the truth, she gave me such a beating that I wondered if I hadn't told her the whole truth from the beginning. What truth? I asked. When Doug was about to continue his explanation, Linda returned to the room. She sat between us again and turned on the camera. There, I saw her and her son attempting to set up a tent where he could play in the future and take shelter from the sun. She climbed a short ladder and started attaching the tent to a wooden structure. Kevin stood aside, watching his mother. She asked him to step away while she secured the tent. Then she glanced at her husband, who was smiling and talking to her. Holding the camera and giving her advice, she wanted to reply to him, but her foot slipped off the step, and Linda fell. The next thing you could see was Doug throwing the camera on the floor and rushing toward her, but the camera fell so that everything was being recorded, and you could see him helping her off the tent. She herself already had a wound on her face and arm. Do you see now? I told you Doug wasn't to blame. It was just an unfortunate accident. I'm sorry, but what about... I started to say, feeling guilty. Are you talking about my so-called affair? Doug interrupted. There's no affair, especially not with your wife. Not that she isn't attractive, but I genuinely love Linda and Kevin, so I would never do such a thing. But Linda, you told me you found women's underwear in his car. I looked questioningly at my sister and then at Doug. Oh, that's easy to explain, but you won't like the answer, Doug replied. Just fucking talk. I want to know the truth. Stephen, your wife has been unfaithful to you, Doug began. I'm sorry, I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want to upset you. I've talked to her many times, tried to reason with her, but she continued anyway. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Even if she cheated on me, how the hell are you involved? And why was women's underwear found in your car? I struggled to make sense of the information he presented. She used to meet the other guy most often in my car. They didn't want to be seen by getting a hotel room, and he couldn't take her home because he's married. But why? Who the hell is this guy? I asked, feeling a wave of anger wash over me again. You know him well. I work as a delivery driver in his department. It's your friend Tim, Doug explained. What a wave of anger washed over me again, and I wanted to attack Doug for spreading such lies about my wife and my friend. However, Linda's stern look made me restrain my anger. I managed to control myself and decided to listen to the terrible truth to the end. I'm sorry, bro, but it's true. He even paid me to keep quiet, and when Linda became suspicious, I told her to stay out of it. I had every hope that I could convince Josephine to stop her madness. Now the puzzle was slowly coming together. I sat there in a state of shock, unable to believe that two people I considered my closest had betrayed me so deeply. I realized I had been wrong about everyone, and I felt ashamed in front of my sister and even my brother-in-law, whom I had always considered some kind of villain. Well, you guys sit tight, and I'll go make some tea and cookies. Since you came to visit, I can't just leave you hungry. And we're not going to bed anyway, Linda said with a smile as she looked at both of us, hoping we would behave properly. I behaved properly, and then I went to the kitchen. But why didn't you tell me earlier? How long have these bastards been lying to me? I asked Doug when we were alone. I'm sorry, I didn't want to upset you. Yes, maybe I should have told you sooner, but I had two reasons to keep quiet. Firstly, I hoped your family would somehow stay intact. And secondly, Tim threatened to fire me and make sure I couldn't find work for a long time. You know how I am? You even took money for this. What makes you any better than a pimp? Essentially, you're just as much a traitor as they are. I stood up and headed for the door. On my way out, I ran into my sister, who was coming out of the kitchen, presumably wanting to ask us what we'd like for breakfast. Oh, Stephen, where are you going? I grumbled rudely, far away, damn it. But she persisted, but what about breakfast? I've almost finished preparing it. I replied, leave it. I don't want it. I'm sorry, sister, but I have to go. She wanted to say something else, but I had already left the house, slamming the door loudly. As I walked towards my car, I saw the unfinished tent meant for Kevin's games. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at it before continuing on my way. Throughout the journey back home, I tried to understand why this had happened to me. Why had my wife decided to cheat on me, and with my best friend no less? And why had this friend chosen to betray me when we had been friends and worked under the same roof for so many years? But now I understood why he sometimes slacked off from the office for urgent matters and asked me to cover for him with the boss. I felt so foolish, as if I had been rolled in a pile of crap and then trampled on. Trampled on by those I trusted. I reached home around noon. There, my wife greeted me as usual, launching into a barrage of reproaches and accusations. You scumbag, I said as I walked in without explaining anything, and I delivered a strong slap to her face. From the force of my blow, which was so strong that Josephine fell to the floor, she grimaced and even cried. What the hell is going on? You barge in here after who knows where you've been. What's gotten into you, bitch? Are you high or something? I leaned over her and pointed my finger. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Oh, you scumbag. You've been nagging me all this time, telling me I was doing everything wrong, trying to make me feel guilty. And all the while, what were you up to, you bitch? A prostitute? Did he pay you to sleep with him? Tell me, you bitch. Stephen, please, what are you talking about? Josephine continued to stand her ground. I couldn't take it anymore and took another swing at her. She was so frightened that she begged me to stop, and that she would confess everything. I lowered my hand and gave her a chance to speak and justify her actions. At the same moment, I remembered that our little son was in the house, and I did not want him to see such scenes. Grabbing my wife by the arm, I dragged her into the kitchen and closed the door behind me. We'll talk. Tell me, I'm listening to you, I said to her, trying to control my anger. Stephen, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, I see you already know everything, but how did you know? She began, holding her hand to her bruised cheek. This is where I ask the questions and you answer. I spoke harshly, but not loudly. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It just happened. I don't know why. I don't even know why I said yes. It's just that at our party he was so sweet, so nice. I don't even remember saying yes to his proposal. And then, when things got crazy, I just couldn't stop. Please don't think that I don't love you or Michael. I do, but I love him too, she cried again. Bitch. Prostitute, I thought to myself, trying to find a clean slice of space for myself in this lying and betraying situation. You lied to me so much. Fucking that asshole behind my back. Do you really think I can forgive you for that? I asked her, my voice shaking with anger. No, she whispered quietly. I walked out of the house, leaving her in tears. I wanted to get back at her, and at him, but I didn't know how. But I couldn't let their betrayal go unpunished either. I wanted to confront my former friend now, and at the very least, beat him up good. I dialed his number, but he didn't answer for some reason. So I went back to the house. I noticed that my wife had already pulled out her cell phone and was trying to call someone. Not yet cooled down from my anger, I grabbed her phone and threw it against the wall. Who the fuck are you gonna call? Your lover again? I yelled at her. No, me, she replied, tears streaming down her face. What? Don't lie to me. Just don't lie to me. You're gonna piss me off. I can barely contain myself as it is, I said, trying to control my anger. In order not to do something irreparable, I left the kitchen and went to the living room, where I turned on the TV and tried not to think about what was happening. I had to calm down, especially since Michael came downstairs a minute later. He saw my mom crying and asked her why she was crying, but she didn't want to tell him about her shame, especially since he was just a kid and wouldn't understand. So she just said she was cutting onions. And that's why she was crying. And then he came to me and asked to watch TV with me. Maybe that's when my son realized something was wrong. Our fight that day didn't escalate into something worse. I hugged him and tried not to show that we no longer had the same feelings and trust with his mom. After the movie, I went to a bar nearby and stayed there until the evening. I wasn't drunk, but I just wanted to be alone, somewhere, anywhere, but not at home. The next day I had to go to work, so I went back. Only this time I didn't want to sleep in the same bed with my wife. The next day I drove to work in a gloomy mood. I couldn't get the thoughts of my betrayed friend out of my head, but he was to be sent on a business trip today. And I hoped that I would not meet him today. At least I would have time to calm down a little, and then come up with a plan for my revenge. But how disappointed I was when I was already sitting in my office and he walked in. The man I thought was my friend. He came in all happy and smiling at me. Imagine that. I just found out I'm getting a promotion, he exclaimed. That's something to celebrate. You bitch, I shouted, jumped up from my chair and pounced on him. He couldn't even understand what had happened or why I was acting like this. But while I was punching him in the face, he was trying to fight back as best he could. The other employees heard our fight and came running to the noise. And when they saw what was going on, they started to take us apart. By the time they succeeded, Tim and I were both pretty battered. Our boss also came to the noise and asked loudly, "What's going on here?" I replied, "I don't know, Chief. I just came in and he's right there. He's crazy. I told you a long time ago." It finally became clear that the problems that had been plaguing me at work lately were because of him. I wanted to attack him again, but my coworker was still holding my hands tightly, so I couldn't get free. I then laid out everything I had learned about Tim to my boss, how he was involved with my wife, and how he used other colleagues in the process. As a result, instead of a promotion, Tim received termination without severance. My boss was a fair person and believed me when I told him, offering to provide witnesses if needed. Then, the promotion that Tim was supposed to get went to me. But my vengeance felt too small to me. Later, I contacted his wife and shared the whole story with her as well. Now, my former friend was not only unemployed, but also without his wife, whom he cherished because she came from a wealthy family. As for my own wife, we eventually got a divorce. I couldn't bear to look her in the eyes anymore, knowing how deeply she had betrayed me. I only allowed her to see our son once a week, thinking that would be enough for her. Doug and I reconciled. I even recommended that he be transferred to an office where he could earn a higher salary. I even suggested that they move in with us. However, they decided not to leave their own nest. So I asked my boss if Doug could work remotely, coming to the office as needed. Since then, Doug, Linda, and Kevin have visited us more often. It was only now that I understood why they hadn't visited us before. Doug simply didn't want any traces of the truth to surface when he met Josephine. If you enjoyed this story, please like and leave a comment. It's important for us and will help promote this video. Thank you for watching us.